Make up for my late wife and son by making you happy.
I almost blurted out, "Huh? Whose wife and son is he talking about?" As I listened more closely, Ted said something even more shocking.
Since I've lost everything, you're the only one I have left. Marry me.
I can't believe Ted is acting like my son and I are dead. To lie like that, and even propose to a young woman. Of course, I can't just stay quiet. When I looked at John, he nodded back at me. Then, we stood up and walked toward Ted. "Hello, we're the supposedly dead family."
We've come back from the other side just for you, Dad.
Ted's eyes widened in shock as we appeared. That's when John and I started our payback against Ted. "My name is Karen. I've been married for 24 years, and I'm a 48-year-old housewife. I grew up as an only child in a household with both parents being high school teachers. When I was little, my grandmother took care of me, but after she passed away during my middle school years, I spent a lot of time alone. Since my dad was the baseball coach and my mom was the volleyball coach, they were often not home during long vacations like summer break. Seeing my friends' families, where mothers were either housewives or part-timers and home in the evenings, made me feel envious. That's why I decided that when I got married and had kids, I would not work and stay home to take care of my family. I was originally shy and never had a boyfriend until I graduated from college. Perhaps out of concern for me, my mom introduced me to a young male colleague soon after I graduated. His name was Ted. He was tall and handsome. According to my mom, he was sociable and well-liked by his students. He seemed too good for someone quiet and plain like me. However, because he respected my mom as a senior teacher, he genuinely faced me. A year after we met, I married Ted. I told Ted that, having felt lonely as a child, I wanted to stay home and take care of my family after getting married. He agreed, saying that since both of his parents worked, he had felt the same way and wanted me to stay at home. Ted shared my values. I believed that with him, I could build a happy family, or so I thought. Ted, with his sociable personality, valued his relationships with colleagues and former students. While that was good, it meant he often neglected family matters. We barely conversed, and when he did talk to me, it was usually to ask me to do something.
Karen, you became a housewife to take care of the household. So I'm grateful I can rely on you for anything.
Ted always flattered me like that, and left everything to me, even things he could do himself. But hearing that made me feel needed, and I couldn't help but take it positively. In such situations, one might say, "I'm not your housemaid," in anger. Furthermore, ever since we got married, Ted was never home on weekend nights. He always went out drinking with colleagues or former students who had become working adults. I had heard from my parents that many teachers used to drink to relieve stress. However, my parents were different. My mom didn't drink, and my dad rarely went out drinking to be considerate of her. So, seeing Ted's lifestyle, I realized that some teachers really did enjoy going out drinking. Still, as long as it didn't affect our living expenses, I didn't say anything at first. But as Ted didn't reduce his drinking outings, even after our child was born, my frustration grew. Ted, I understand that socializing is important, but can't you turn down invitations sometimes? Having endured it without saying anything, I couldn't help but ask. Ted replied with a slightly perplexed expression.
Huh? Why are you asking that now? You've never said anything before.
Well, I know teachers have a lot of social obligations, but I want you to value the time at home for John's sake too. I said it for the sake of my son, John, but Ted furrowed his brows, seemingly annoyed.
Listen, Karen, both your parents are teachers, right? So, even if there's a problem, you have someone close to consult. But I don't have that, so I have no choice but to go out drinking with other teachers.
Ted insisted on his position as a teacher. Hearing that made me feel sad, thinking that since I wasn't working, I couldn't be of any help to Ted. Regardless of my feelings, it's lonely for our son, John, to have his father absent every weekend night. I just wanted Ted to properly face John. But Ted didn't seem to understand my feelings. Even though I felt that way, I couldn't say anything back. Despite my frustration, there was nothing I could do, and a gap slowly formed between us. That said, there were still some enjoyable moments in our current life. Ted, being popular with his students, often had former students who had already graduated and become working adults visit our home. Especially in the past 5 or 6 years, 2 former students, who were class mood makers, started visiting frequently. Their names were Eddie and Richard. They had graduated from college and entered the workforce, but still visited us during their breaks. Thanks to them, Ted's weekend drinking outings had decreased over the years. John, being a senior in college, had become good friends with these two, given their close ages. I also felt happy whenever these cheerful and kind young men visited our home. They always brought cakes for me whenever they visited. Today, too, they came over with cakes during their day off. However, Ted had been out since morning. Eddie, Richard, I'm sorry. My husband left last night and hasn't come back yet. As I greeted them, they looked at me somewhat awkwardly. They might have felt sorry for coming over when Ted wasn't home.
No, we should be the ones apologizing for intruding when he isn't home. But, is John here?
Oh, John, yes, he's here. Hearing this, John came out of his room. Or rather, it seemed he had been waiting for them, as he was already dressed to go out.
Mom, I'm going out with Eddie and Richard for a bit.
John left the house with them, still looking somewhat troubled. It seemed they had something to talk about that they didn't want me to hear. Well, as a boy of his age, he might have concerns he can't share with his mother. Despite my worries, I silently saw the 3 of them off. Then, as I passed by John's room, I noticed his phone ringing. It's unusual for John to forget his phone. I entered John's room and reached for his phone. At that moment, I accidentally touched the unlocked screen and gasped. It was a message from Eddie. An image had been sent, showing Ted with his arm around a young woman, entering a hotel. The message read,
I don't want to believe it, but the woman with your dad looks like a waitress. I followed them from the club.
John's reply was,
I won't tell Mom. It would devastate her.
that's why Eddie and Richard had come to see John. Or perhaps, if Ted had been home, they might have confronted him. In any case, my mind was in chaos. I couldn't believe Ted was having an affair. I wanted to confront him directly, but I held back. I didn't want to burden John, who was in the middle of job hunting, with our marital issues. So, I decided to pretend I hadn't seen the message for now. A while later, John came back, still looking troubled. I greeted him, trying to maintain my composure. Just then, Ted returned home. Ted looked at us curiously.
What's up with you two, just standing there?
The atmosphere was awkward. John was probably trying to hide the truth from me. For a while, John and I continued to act normally around Ted as if nothing had happened. Months passed, and it was almost Christmas. We planned to celebrate both Christmas Eve and John's job offer as a family. However, I was still troubled by Ted's affair and couldn't bring myself to speak up. Then, Ted said something unexpected.
I'm going to a Christmas party on the 24th, so I won't need dinner.
Since the 24th was the last day of school, it made sense that there would be a party. But given the date, I wondered if he was lying. Even so, I couldn't confront him and simply replied, "Okay." Recently, conversations with Ted had dwindled, and I felt stifled every day. Seeing this, John tried to cheer me up.
Mom, I got 2 dinner tickets for a hotel where Eddie's relative works. It's for the 24th. Let's go together.
Really, you're inviting me? Don't you have anyone else to go with? A bit embarrassed by John's invitation, I asked.
No. Eddie and Richard have plans that day. Plus, my school friends are spending it with their girlfriends.
Since John was trying to make me feel better, I decided to accept his invitation. It's been years since John and I went out to eat together. Moreover, since it was a fancy hotel, I decided to dress up a bit. I was looking forward to it, not knowing that day would bring unexpected misfortune. Then, on the night of the 24th, John and I went to the hotel for dinner. The hotel was even more luxurious than I had imagined, and I was momentarily overwhelmed. Feeling nervous, I entered the restaurant on the top floor, and the waiter led us to our table. It felt more like a place for lovers proposing than a place for a parent and child to dine. Looking around, most of the patrons were young couples. Especially the couple seated by the window, with a woman in flashy makeup and fashion and, oh. Seeing the man across from the woman, I couldn't believe my eyes. I hadn't noticed at first since his back was to me, but it was Ted. Ted was dressed in a formal suit I'd never seen before. He must have bought or rented it for this occasion. I was frozen, unable to move. John probably hadn't noticed Ted yet, so I tried to remain calm. But since our tables were close, I could clearly hear Ted's voice.
To make up for my late wife and son, I will make you happy.
I almost blurted out, "Huh? Whose wife and son is he talking about?" As I listened more closely, Ted said something even more shocking.
Since I've lost everything, you're the only one I have left. Marry me.
Is it really okay with someone like me? I'm so happy.
Their table was by a large window offering a panoramic view of the city nightscape. In such a romantic setting, the proposal must have moved her deeply. John, sitting across from me, seemed to recognize his father's voice and started to turn around. "John, wait a minute." I hastily stopped John, trying to prevent him from seeing Ted's face. But John had already realized that the man proposing to a strange woman was his father. John and I listened in silence. Ted's proposal continued.
You're amazing. After losing my wife and son, I lost the will to live. But thanks to you, my future looks bright.
Really? You need me that much?
Of course. Meeting you makes me want to thank my deceased family.
Ted, speaking sweet words, pulled something out of his pocket. It looked like an engagement ring. The ring she was admiring looked much more expensive than the one I got. I can't forgive Ted for pretending my son and I are dead. To lie like that, and even propose to such a young woman. Of course, I can't stay silent. When I looked at John, he nodded. Then, we stood up and walked towards Ted. "Hello, we're the supposedly dead family."
Hey, we came back from the other side just for you, Dad.
Ted's eyes widened in shock at our sudden appearance. His bewildered mistress looked confused.
Who are these people? That old lady and the guy who looks like a mama's boy. Are they friends of Ted?
Who knows? I don't know them. It's probably some prank. Just ignore them.
Ted tried to dismiss us, but sweat was dripping down his forehead. Thinking we were just a prank, the mistress glared at us.
What do you want, lady? Stop ruining our happiness with your weird harassment.
It's not harassment, you've been deceived. This man is Ted Omar, he's my husband.
Oh, his name matches. But do you have any proof that he's your husband? If you keep making false accusations, I'll call the police.
I have proof right here.
John said, taking an envelope from his bag. Inside was his birth certificate. Amy, the mistress, snatched it and showed it to Ted.
What? What is this? You said he lost your wife and child.
Confronted by Ayu, Ted shrank back, unable to say anything. I wondered why John had prepared such a thing. Seeing my puzzled look, John seemed to understand my question. He looked at Ted and said,
Dad, I've known about your affair with this woman for a while. I found out you'd be meeting her here today.
What are you talking about?
Ted, even now, tried to play dumb. He's such a shameless man.
Damn it.
John snorted at those words.
You can't deny it any longer, Dad. I recorded your proposal on my phone.
What are you talking about? You don't even have your phone on you.
The lawyer over there is holding it for me.
When John pointed to the other table, I saw a man in his 50s sitting with Richard. Moreover, Eddie emerged from the back of the restaurant. It seemed they had planned this confrontation to expose Ted's affair. I was surprised that John had orchestrated everything. The man sitting with Richard approached us and bowed slightly.
Hello, I'm Richard's father. Mr. Omar has always been helpful to my son.
Oh, you're Richard's father. It's been a while.
No, this is our first meeting. My wife has handled everything regarding our son's school, to my shame.
By the way, are you here with your family for dinner?
Ted seemed puzzled about why Richard and his father were at such a place. Then Richard spoke up from beside his father.
Mr. Omar, actually, I asked my dad to look into something. He's a lawyer, and when I told him about the situation, he investigated you. He found out you'd be here today with your mistress.
Ted showed a look of shock upon hearing that Richard's father was a lawyer and had investigated him. Obviously, Ted was surprised because he had something to hide. I also hadn't expected them to involve a lawyer. Ted glared at me with sharp eyes.
Aaron, what is the meaning of this?
I don't know. I had no idea.
Dad, Mom had nothing to do with this. It was all our doing.
Ted's eyes widened even more, stunned by John's words. I, too, wondered why John had gone to such lengths. Then John explained the events. Eddie sent him the line message with the photo of Ted's affair. John had been consulting with Eddie and Richard about what to do without letting me find out. However, they couldn't come up with a solution on their own, so Richard consulted his father. Richard's father took on the task of investigating Ted, even though it wasn't work-related. Moreover, the restaurant where Ted had arranged to meet his mistress was one where Eddie's relative worked. That's how John got the dinner tickets to stake out Ted.
I was torn about bringing Mom, but I wanted to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't stand watching you and Dad pretending to be a happy couple.
So that's why John invited me here. I had always thought of John as a child. I was surprised to see how much he cared about his parents and how much he had matured. As I was lost in these thoughts, Richard suddenly made a surprising statement to Ted.
Mr. Omar, my dad found out that Amy, your mistress, is actually Emmy Henderson, who was in the same class as Eddie and me in our freshman year.
What? Her name is supposed to be Amy Kirk. It's on her business card.
That's her stage name. Mr. Omar, don't you remember? She's Emily Henderson, who dropped out in September of our freshman year. That's her, Emily Henderson.
Confronted by Richard, Ted stared intently at Amy's face.
Amy, are you really that Henderson?
What are you talking about? Who's Henderson? I don't know anyone by that name.
Amy denied it desperately, but she clearly looked flustered. Seeing her reaction, Richard showed a picture on his phone and said,
My friend happened to go to the same middle school as Yamaguchi and showed me their yearbook. I took a photo of Emily Henderson from it. Look, the large mole under her left eye, just like yours.
Richard pointed at Amy's face. Amy instinctively covered the area under her eye with her hand, but it was too late. Giving up, Amy smirked and said,
Fine, you got me. Yes, I'm Emily Henderson, who was in Mr. Omar's class in freshman year. I couldn't stay in school because of him.
The room fell silent at Amy's sudden change in demeanor. What was she planning by approaching Ted? While I pondered this, Ted asked Amy first.
You couldn't stay in school because of me. What do you mean by that?
You wouldn't remember. To you, I was just a shadow.
Amy began recounting her story from back then. When she started school, she was isolated and couldn't fit in with the class. She struggled with her studies and wanted to talk to her homeroom teacher, Ted, but he never paid her any attention. Although Ted was popular among the students, he tended to favor the flashy ones. Conversely, he might have neglected the quieter, less noticeable students. Just like how he neglected me at home. Despite her being his affair partner, I felt a bit of empathy for Amy. Richard's father, who had been listening, gently patted Amy's shoulder.
I understand your pain, but why did you decide to date Mr. Omar without revealing your true identity?
With tears in her eyes, Amy replied,
I wanted revenge. I wanted to ruin his family by making him cheat. By chance, he came to my club as a customer, so I made sure he would pick up on me. I thought if his wife found out he was cheating with me, she'd divorce him.
Though I felt some sympathy for Amy, her methods seemed excessive. No matter the reason, cheating is still cheating. Ted, who had been listening, suddenly glared at Amy with suspicion.
You played with my feelings just for that. What about my feelings?
Ted exclaimed, acting as if he were the victim. Unable to stand Ted's selfish attitude any longer, I finally spoke up. Shut up. Stop acting like the victim. Cheating is cheating. I've known for a while. My sudden outburst took everyone by surprise.
What's wrong, Karen? This isn't like you.
I've been holding it in all this time. Ever since we got married, you've been gone every weekend for socializing. And now this affair, I can't forgive you anymore. I poured out all the feelings I had been holding back. I thought I might have gotten through to Ted, but he showed no signs of remorse.
Well, it's because you never talked, and being at home was boring. So, I ended up going out with colleagues or inviting former students for drinks. It's part of being a teacher.
Just because you're a teacher doesn't mean you can neglect your family. Both my parents were high school teachers, and they valued their family. What you're saying is just an excuse.
Well, if you were also a teacher, it might have been different. But being with a wife like you who isn't even a conversation partner was suffocating. So,
Dad, stop it. This is pathetic.
John's sharp words silenced Ted immediately. Richard's father, who had been watching the whole scene, tried to calm Ted down.
I've heard from my son and my late wife that you are a good teacher. However, family is irreplaceable. I lost my wife 2 years ago, but you have such a wonderful wife. Please, from now on, consider the importance of facing your family.
No, that's not necessary, Ted. Let's separate. I've already talked to my parents. They said I can return home anytime. I felt bad for interrupting Richard's father, but I needed to be clear about my feelings. Ted looked panicked.
What? Then what happens to me? Sure, I wanted to separate, but I was deceived by the person I planned to remarry.
You talk about being deceived, but you lied about your wife and child being dead. As we argued, Richard's father intervened.
This should go to court. Since your husband's infidelity is the cause, you can claim alimony.
I will also take responsibility and pay alimony.
Amy, who had been silent until now, also acknowledged the gravity of her actions. Ted, now surrounded with no way out, had nothing left to say. Eventually, we went to court, and the divorce was finalized. Of course, I was able to claim alimony from Ted. Amy, or rather Emily Henderson, also offered to pay alimony, but I decided to decline. Although I couldn't forgive her for the affair, she seemed genuinely remorseful. Additionally, since she lost her job because of this incident, which was partly Ted's fault, I decided to handle her case with leniency. Ted complained that it was unfair for him alone to pay alimony. Despite all his wrongdoings, Ted showed no remorse. In any case, with the divorce finalized, I no longer cared about Ted. Later, I heard from Richard and his father that Ted's affair with a former student and the resulting divorce became the talk of the school. The rumors quickly spread among parents, leading to a flood of complaints to the school. This ultimately caused Ted to lose the trust of students and parents, forcing him to resign voluntarily. Looking for another job was difficult for Ted due to the bad rumors. Most local high schools wouldn't accept him. The only place that would take him was a remote branch school in the mountains. But Ted, who had always enjoyed being the center of attention, refused, saying he didn't want to be in such a deserted place. Unable to find a new job and falling behind on his rent, the landlord eventually told Ted to leave. Ted, with nowhere else to go, tried to move in with Eddie, who lived alone.
Mr. Omar, please don't ruin the image I had of you as a respected teacher. You're really uncool right now.
With those words, Ted was quickly turned away. Now, no one knows where Ted has gone. After the divorce, I returned to my parents' house. John soon moved out to live on his own after starting his job, and he's now fully independent. My parents were a bit sad that John didn't stay with them. But I'll be leaving my parents' house soon as well. Since the divorce, I've grown close to Richard's father, and we're getting married. Although he's busy with his work as a lawyer, he cherishes the time we spend together. Therefore, I don't think I'll be feeling lonely anymore. John is very happy for me and has started calling Richard brother. I feel like my life so far has been filled with enduring hardships. But I'm ready to graduate from just enduring. Although I haven't worked much before, I decided to start something new and became a clerk at my new husband's office. Initially, it was challenging to get used to the job, but my husband and the staff are kind and teach me patiently. I'm very happy being with someone I love both at work and at home. Now, I find that life has become enjoyable. Yes, This is the start of a new chapter in my life.